Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's May 16, 2023, and this is episode 815. This week we conclude this series to walk you through our adventures on the complete Namibia tour that I ran from the middle of April 2023. We travelled north from Sossusvlei to Walvis Bay, where we'd spent 2 days photographing the flamingos and other shorebirds. Walvis Bay was refreshingly cool after the unseasonably hot days we'd spent in Sossusvlei. This first photo of a flamingo landing reminds me of a young Japanese girl wearing a furisode kimono, like the ones they might wear at their coming-of-age ceremony, as it's a bit more flamboyant than the more subdued colours that a lady of slightly more advanced years might wear. I was initially annoyed that I didn't get much of the reflection, but this image grew on me, and I do like the amount of detail that we can see in the bird because it takes up more of the frame. The highlight of the Walvis Bay visit is getting a chance to get the flamingos at sunset, as you can see in this next image. To ensure that there is water covering the entire foreground, I go down the beach past the mud flats and get my camera right down to water level and shoot using the articulated screen. This makes it more difficult to shoot, but if you keep your eye on the digital level and ensure that you are focusing on the flamingos, it can be a beautiful shot. I'm still hoping for a perfect heart with 2 heads from flamingos at some point, but I haven't bagged that one yet. The following morning we travelled north again to photograph the Himba people in their town, and on the way made a stop at the Zela shipwreck. I often look for something to put in the foreground and rarely find it, but this year I was relatively happy to see some kelp lying on the beach, so I included that, as you can see here. We had a bit of a shock when we got to the Himba village, where they'd been every year that I've been visiting for the last 11 years. As a semi-nomadic people, I know that there was always the risk that they would not be there, and this year they were not. They might have moved on because of the lack of rain at the end of last year, although the valley was relatively green when we got there because of the late rains we'd seen. I have people looking for the settlement and will hopefully be able to visit them during my upcoming trip, assuming they didn't move because they had become tired of people turning up to photograph them, and that is a distinct possibility, as I know that few other visitors treat them the way we do and the way they should. There was a ray of hope when we drove into Sesfontein a little later in the day, and we noticed a sign in English that read Traditional Himba Village. As I'm sure you just imagined though, it was a pretty nasty tourist trap. There were a number of Himba people there, and they were very nice, but it was a far cry from the settlement I've always visited. There was no sense of them living there, and the flies were unbearable. We made a number of images, some of which were nice, but I'm hoping we don't have to return on my upcoming trip. Here are 3 images that I selected from our visit. To finish our trip, we spend 2 days in one lodge on the southwest corner of the Etosha National Park, and another 2 days on the east side of the park. They are both amazing lodges and have their own wildlife, and we go out with one of their guides on the first afternoon when we arrive. We were treated on this trip to being allowed to get out of our safari vehicle and walk to within 35 meters of a family of white rhino that were sleeping under some trees. The baby jumped up as we walked towards them, and his scurrying around woke the adults as well. Here you can see them as they walk towards us, shortly before we got back into our vehicle, 50 paces or so away. It's awesome to see and be able to get so close to these magnificent animals. It's possible because of the relationship that the rhino have with the guides that spend so much time in the reserve, and also because these are white rhino. Black rhino, although smaller, are much more aggressive and would probably charge us as soon as they became aware of our presence. The rest of the photos from the tour were shot inside the Etosha National Park. As I've prepared for this episode, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to finish this with just 10 more photos, and I really want to wrap this series up before traveling again. So we'll push the number of images a little and keep storming through, continuing with what I feel is a relatively minimalist photo of an oryx half submerged in a waterhole. Waterholes can be busy places, so I was pleased to be able to get this without other animals encroaching on the scene. The reason I was not able to get the number of images down to just 10 was that some of the scenes we saw this year, like this next image, seemed to have an almost biblical scale to them. I was torn between this and an earlier image when we saw this herd of elephants come through the trees in the distance. But I love how we can see the whole extended family of elephants here, including their children, making their way across the plain to the waterhole. It's lovely to see so many young elephants in their herds, as these are amazingly cute, especially when bathing in the waterhole, as you can see in this next image. I'm always fascinated by how they use their trunks and as they learn how to control the appendage that essentially becomes their hand to interact with the world around them. The next image was from the Okokweyo waterhole on the second morning, which was the start of the day when we would drive through the Etosha National Park in time to leave through the gate on the east side to our lodge for the last 2 nights before we returned to Windhoek to return home. The zebra at waterholes are easily spooked, and often, as in this case, it's hard to even know what spooked them. But when they decide to take off, the sound of their hooves on the rocks along with the splashing water is unforgettable. I've always wanted a nice shot of a steenbok, the second smallest antelope in Namibia, and I was really happy to get this shot with the steenbok in an idyllic setting. It was in the shade under a tree, so somewhat challenging lighting, but the shadow slider helped to bring out the details, mainly because I always shoot with a technique called exposed to the right, so the camera was not allowed to darken my main subject down too much, which is what would have happened if I'd relied on metering technology that hasn't really changed in more than 100 years. I've also wanted a good shot of the dik-dik, the smallest antelope, for a number of years, and we got some during our trip, but the 4-kilogram antelope looks so strange, almost like a rodent, that I'm still trying to figure out if I actually like the resulting images. Another almost biblical scene here with 4 bull elephants at a waterhole, Springbok in the distance, and the Etosha pan even further back. This is another stitch of 3 or 4 images, so the details at 100% is fascinating. I'll try to print this one out large when I get some time. I was pretty happy with this shot as well of a lilac-breasted roller as it took flight from a tree that we'd parked by. These are beautiful birds and a lot of fun to shoot as a group because people start to get tired of waiting for them to fly and all sorts of banter starts to fly around the vehicle. This was a lovely moment when I caught this black-faced impala with a huge smile on its face, and the setting with the soft grasses really makes this image for me. I added a bit of a vignette to the image to focus the light on the subject a little. Here is another stitched panorama of another section of the black-faced impala feeding in the same long grass. I'm really enjoying being able to quickly and accurately stitch images together right there in Capture One Pro and get a DNG file so I can continue to work with all of the benefits of the raw format. Here is a secretary bird strutting its stuff through the grasses of eastern Etosha National Park. I remember photographing one of these in the Ueno Zoo in Tokyo years ago, and never would have thought I'd be fortunate enough to visit Africa and photograph them in the wild like this. Such a beautiful bird. Okay, so after that sprint through all of the images I wanted to share from Etosha, here is one of the last images I shot on this tour, and a fitting ending image for the series. We had literally minutes left before we had to leave the park, as you're not allowed to be in there after sundown. But we saw the sun poking through the clouds, which are not common at this time of year, and we found a few giraffes that we may be able to place in the scene and raced over. We were able to position our vehicle in a way that enabled us to make this photograph. As usual, at the end of the trip I went around the table with a digital recorder and received some lovely comments from our guests, which I'd like to play you now. Okay, so here we are at the end of the 2023 Complete Namibia Tour, the first one of two, and we have just got back from the Etosha National Park and we are sitting around a table watching the sunset. And I'm going to go around the table as usual and get a comment from each of the guests. So who'd like to start? Shall we start with Jim?
Yeah. So it's Jim from Canada, and it's been an exceptional trip. I had high expectations before coming, and I think every one of them were met. It's just been an incredible tour. Everything was extremely well organized. We had an excellent guide who was just so knowledgeable, and best of all, I'm going home with so many fantastic images. I'm going to have a really hard time trying to figure out which ones to be putting up on the wall after these past 2 weeks. So it's been just amazing. Highly, highly recommend.
Thank you, Jim. So Bob?
Okay, I'll try to do this without crying, all right? My name's Barb and I'm from Australia. I've wanted to do this trip for over 10 years and was a bit worried that I'd gotten my expectations too high, but everyone has been satisfied. Every day had its own highlight, and I'm going home with photos I never imagined that I would take. Namibia is full of the most magnificent sights and sounds.
Thank you. Ella?
Hi, my name is Ella. I'm from New York City. I never imagined that Namibia was that beautiful, although I have thought it was beautiful, but it's even more than I thought. And seeing it through the eyes of Martin and the guide that we had really made the experience so much better. Most of anything, I think I have learned so much about seeing and photographing things that it'll stay with me forever, not just the experience, but the skills that I have gotten. So, highly recommend it.
Thank you. Okay, I'll come around here. So, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff. I'm from Philadelphia in the United States. We just finished our 17 days in Namibia and it has been absolutely wonderful. As you've probably heard from other people speaking before me, the trip was just enormously successful. It was beautifully organized, the experiences were fantastic, and I would say the one thing that I'm taking away with me more than anything else is new ways of approaching, doing completely manual settings for my photography and learning to explore exposure to the right, which opens up all sorts of new possibilities. And all of this, of course, is thanks to Martin. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much. Okay, finally, Katie.
Not much left to say. I'm Katie from Philadelphia. This was just an incredible trip. I've learned so much. I'm a relatively new photographer and learned just so many things. I hope I can remember them all. I can't say there was one favorite thing because every place we went had something incredibly special and unique that we saw. The places that we stayed were wonderful. Apart from the photography, just the places we stayed were really remarkable and beautiful and comfortable. I thought maybe I was too old for this kind of thing, but I'm not. So I loved every minute of it. Well, almost every minute of it. Getting here was a chore, but it was a wonderful time. Thank you so much, Martin, for everything.
Not at all. You're all very welcome. Thanks for the lovely comments, and thank you so much for joining me here in Namibia. Okay, so we'll start to wrap it up there for this episode and series. I'll be off the air again for another 3 weeks as I travel on the second Namibia tour. When I get back, I'll try to present a shorter series only showing work that was different to this, so we should be able to move on relatively quickly. If you are considering joining me on a future Namibia tour, my 2024 trip may be my last visit, so please get your ducks in a row and visit my tours page at mbp.ac/tours for details. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon, which comes with various benefits depending on your contribution, from basic support and access to the MBP Community Forum to full-blown photography mentorships. For further details, check out our Patreon page at mbp.ac/Patreon. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back probably in the second week in June after the next trip. So in the meantime, you take care and have a great 3 weeks, whatever you're doing. Bye bye.